All right, John. I think we can go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, thanks, Cheyenne, and thanks everybody for joining. We are very excited today, as today is our first webinar. So UpCodes is very excited to welcome you guys here today, and we will first do some introductions, some housekeeping, and then we're going to get into the product. So my name is John Dickman, and I'm an account executive here with UpCodes, and I'm in today from Ventura, California. And Cheyenne, who will be answering some of your questions along the way and work in the chat, is our operations manager, and she is located in Windsor, Canada. So we'll just do a few housekeeping items before we get started. As we're going through the Zoom, if you have any questions, please use the Zoom Q&A button there at the bottom throughout. We're going to try our best to answer questions in real time if they're relevant. If the presentation moves on and a question comes in that was already covered, we'll try to cover that at the end when we have a Q&A session. So please keep those questions coming and we'll do our best to answer them. We're going to be recording today's webinar, and we're going to send you a link to that recording. So if you missed something, if you have to log off early, or if you want to share with others around the firm, you'll be free to do that. And then we'd love to hear your feedback. So we're going to send out a survey as well, asking what kind of topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars or how we can make the webinar better. So we're going to do a brief UpCodes overview today. And I apologize if some of you are heavy users of UpCodes and some of this might be review at first. We'll keep that part pretty short, but then we'll get into the live demonstration and we'll cover our code library, our projects, our code calculators, and a whole lot more. And then we'll leave some time at the end for a question and answer period. All right. So first thing I'd like to say, and many of you have experienced this, is that it seems like the code research process for architects, engineers, general contractors getting into the building code is very fragmented. There's multiple sources that folks need to access to find the right information. Office library. Is the book in the office? Has Chuck taken the book home for the day and now we don't know where it is? PDFs on the company server, are they up to date? Are there any sort of errata or updates that's happened since that PDF got put on our server? We could always go to the AHJ website, but come on, it's a pretty clunky website and they probably just have the amendments and tell you which building code to look at. And so that's a pretty disjointed process right there. And then just figuring out which codes are adopted in which jurisdictions. Now, a lot of organizations don't even have a dedicated solution for code compliance. There's pretty much a dedicated workflow for project management, spec writing, plan review, but there's really no way to enforce office-wide code compliance standards. UpCodes is trying to fill that gap. So today we're going to present UpCodes and show that it's a consolidated platform for all those code research questions, updates, errata, amendments, which publications are in play in a given jurisdiction. We're going to talk about how to automate and structure the research process before a project gets started, as opposed to a manual code review that many firms go through. And we're going to talk about how to share company-wide knowledge. Firms are learning lessons on every project, but what happens to that knowledge? Does it just stay with one individual at their desk? How can we tap into that and let the whole firm benefit from those experiences? And we're working with a ton of firms, a ton of companies, general contractors, engineers, architects, plans examiners, and building officials. We work with very big companies, large architecture firms, SOM, Datner, Enid, all the way down to sole proprietors or two-man operations. And then we have over 500,000 folks every month that are on UpCodes looking for codes, finding what's the most up-to-date jurisdictional information. So today we're going to cover our online code library and research function. We're going to look at some of the educational pieces. How do we level up newer staff or younger staff, folks new to the industry, and get them up to speed with code? Code automation, how can we streamline the initial code research process? And project management, how can we have a streamlined way to do our code analysis and research? Now we're going to hop over to a live demo of UpCodes. So here I am on the UpCodes site, And all the codes that we host are sorted in two main ways. The first way is by these different jurisdictions, and I can see them off to the left-hand side. We've got all 50 states, even Puerto Rico, and then larger cities, Denver, Chicago. We just added Wichita last week. I think Detroit's on the way. We just added Kansas City last week. So we're going to keep adding more and more cities to this list, and this will be ever growing. Within each one of these jurisdictions, we have any sort of code book that they've adopted with all their local amendments. Now that's going to include something like South Carolina on January 1st have a new code. They've gone through a code adoption cycle, and they're going to be adopting the 2021 IBC with amendments. So that will be their adoption, and that's coming in the future, but we already have it on Upcodes. So we're going to be tracking any sort of code cycles. And then again, along with any periodic updates, errata, all those things will be added onto these codes. The other way we sort these things is just by the different adoptions by publisher. So we have different NFPA 1 adoptions, NFPA 13 adoptions, IBC 2018 adoptions, accessibility adoptions, elevator adoptions, structural concrete, healthcare adoptions. And if I click into any one of these, we'll go down here. I can see all the different adoptions right laid out here. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a jurisdiction. We've already talked about South Carolina. Let's just stick in South Carolina. And I'll pause here for just a moment to say that all the codes that we host online are available for anybody. They're free and you can access them. You can refer others to access them. They're a free resource for the community. From this point on, just about everything we cover in the presentation are going to be for those firms that have been adding Upcodes as a firm-wide resource to help with project management, code analysis, and code research. So first thing I can do is I can come in here and I can type a term. Now it's going to search that term across the whole jurisdiction. So any publication within that jurisdiction, it's going to be searching for that term. So I can see building code results, more building code results, fire code results, sprinkler installation results. Now for my purposes, maybe I'm only interested in the building code and the fire code. So I want to pare my results down and look only at a couple of books here. What's nice about this feature and what our clients really benefit from is having the ability to find out whether or not there's a more restrictive code section in another book within that jurisdiction. Maybe the fire code is actually more restrictive here, and this is a great way to show those differences. So when I found the section that I'm interested in, I'll click into it and it'll take me right into the code. Now, first thing I'll say about the code is everything is very interconnected. So each section of code is individually hyperlinked. I can click this copy link button, and now I could maybe go into a document I'm working on and share that link. Maybe I need to give that to a building inspector or a general contractor I'm working with. Whenever they click that link, it'll take them to the free codes. Now we can be assured that we're looking at the exact same section of code, the exact same year, all the local amendments. We know we have accuracy when we're communicating now. Also, any definition or section that's referenced is going to be highlighted when I hover over it. So I see horizontal assemblies. Oh, I hover over it. Now the definition pops up. Or what is section 707? Oh, that's what section 707 is, instead of having to flip back and forth between the books. And of course, if I do want to go to section 707, I can just click on it, and now I've got it in a new tab. All right, you'll probably notice this green illustration bar here. And if I click on that, it's going to open up these linked resources here. So I'm going to click on one of those. And now what I see is one of our diagrams, which is a visual unpacking of the code, a graphical representation of what the code says in so many words. So this content has been created by experts in the field, plans examiners, structural engineers, architects, fire marshals. I can zoom in. We can see this one gets into the real nitty-gritty. We have over 500 of these, and I'm going to show you the library in a moment. And we've added 220 this year alone. So this is an ever-growing resource. We'll also give a plain English overview explaining in real words what the code is attempting to say. And then we're going to link you to related sections. This is where it gets real interesting because not only are there sections of the building code that are referenced, but also the fire code. So again, maybe there's a section of the fire code that's relevant or maybe more restrictive. Here's a great way to get into those different publications from the building code. I'm coming up here to the side. Now, those illustrations are going to be strategically sprinkled in throughout the code, but we also can just go to the diagram homepage and search for particular information. They're broken down by jurisdiction, code type, topic. And again, we saw something very nitty gritty. I can do large topics though. Tell me about accessible means of egress on stairways. All the way down to what are the components of a 1 hour wall with steel studs? These images are very useful too, because I can come in here and copy that image. It's got a transparent background. And again, maybe I want to speak with the code official and tell them why my interpretation of the code might be more accurate. Now, while these aren't authoritative documents, they're definitely a great example, a great jumping off point for a conversation about what the code intends to say. And I'll point out that I've spoken to folks with 40 years experience in the code, and they tell me that they've learned a ton from looking at these diagrams. So it's a great resource. And again, it's going to be ever growing. All right, so I'm going back into the building code now. And now that I'm here in the building code, maybe I'm going to show you these amendments here. Anytime there's a local amendment, we're going to flag it for you and say amendment. Now, it might be something small like it is here, but if I were to go into California, the code of which is all one big amendment, I would see all the amendments. And the amendment text will appear in green. So if I'm working in a new jurisdiction, maybe I'm not as familiar with the code there, I'm going to know when I'm looking at a section that's been changed. I can also compare the code. So again, I'm working in a new jurisdiction, and maybe I want to see, well, what's different in Virginia from South Carolina? All I have to do is come over here and hit my code comparison feature, and I'm going to get a breakdown of what's the same and what's different between these two codes. Or again, South Carolina, adopting a new code, California adopting a new code, Connecticut, Alabama, lots of jurisdictions are going through code adoption cycles. What if I need to see, well, what's different and what's the same about this new code? So let's compare the new code and the old code and see, what has South Carolina done to change the code? Next, I'm going to introduce the concept of projects to you. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to mention something. All these codes that we have here available, and I'm presenting from a desktop, they're all available mobily as well. So if I'm out on the job, if I need to be remote and start answering some questions, I can access these on my phone, iPad. As long as I have access to the internet, all these codes are available to me, along with that search function for our paid users. All right, so I'm coming in here to projects, and there's 3 main uses for our projects. The first use is to store relevant information about the code for a particular project that I'm working on. So here I've got 123 Main Street. It's a project that I'm working on in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to click into it, and it's going to take me to my project homepage. Here, I can see all the different sections of code that I've diligently gone through and bookmarked as relevant for my particular project. I've used, now these are all in the DC, these are all the DC adoptions, but I'm looking at the accessibility code, mechanical code, plumbing. I'm looking at the fire code, the building code. And let me show you how this works. I'm going to click in here, and as I'm prepping for my project to get started, I'm going to go through and figure out what the relevant sections of code that apply to my project are. And anytime I come upon one, I'm simply going to bookmark it. Now that section of code is going to live in my central project repository, and all those codes can be spit out onto a nice PDF where I can see them in one spot. Now, maybe I come across a section such as parking garages, and I'm going to make the case to why this section of code doesn't apply to my building. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a comment. I'm going to say this does not apply because, and I'm going to make my argument as to why this section of code isn't relevant to my building. Now, in 3 months, when the building inspector says, well, why didn't you think about parking garages? I'll be able to say, I thought about it. And in fact, I remembered what I thought because I stored all that right with the code. Now, I could also, maybe I don't know a whole lot about parking garages, but you know who does? Cheyenne. Cheyenne knows a ton about parking garages. So I'm going to tag Cheyenne and ask her, does this apply? Or am I thinking about this the right way? Or does the HJ care about this? Whatever comment might be relevant. And I'm going to post it. As soon as I post that, Cheyenne gets an email saying, John tagged you in the project. She can click a link in that email and it's going to take her right to the project homepage. Now she can come on here and apply everything that she knows. She's worked with this HJ, she knows about parking garages. Bam, now it's all in my project. So all this stuff is going to be exportable out to a nice looking PDF, and I'm going to show you that here. I'm going to download one and we'll take a look at it. And of course, this is something you could share with your building inspector or have a central source of truth for your document. I can see all the different types of codes that I used. I can click around, it'll take me right to that section. And all of my commentary is included right here. The next thing of importance I can do in my projects is to create chunks of knowledge that I'm going to use over and over again. So for instance, my firm, we build a lot of public high school laboratories. And I've created a template for that, public high school lab. And I've gone through and entered in information that's relevant to public high schools generally. I've bookmarked sections, I've highlighted when different code books are more restrictive than the building code, entered all sorts of wonderful notes in there. But now, when I'm going to start a particular high school, I'm going to come in here to my template, I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to change the jurisdiction. This one is in Washington, but I'm going to change it to Pennsylvania. I'm going to include my bookmarks and my comments. And now we'll rename it. We'll call it PA High School South. And it's a lab. All right, so I've duplicated it. Now, when I go into that project, everything is in the language of Pennsylvania's building code. It started in Washington's building code, but everything is now in Pennsylvania building code. So now I have my general scope of the research done for such a project, but maybe there's particularities to this project that need their own explanation. So I'm going to go back into the code, and now I'm going to start bookmarking more sections that are important. The last way that folks like to use this is just as a place to store knowledge. Now, this could be my own knowledge, my own personal bookmarks, things I'm learning about the code, or it could be our whole firm. Each project, we're picking up a little bit of knowledge. We're learning something about a jurisdiction, about egress, whatever the case may be. I'm going to come in here and document those. Let's flag those sections. Let's add the lessons that we've learned. That way we don't have to keep learning it over and over again. Or, you know, the grizzled vet who's been in the code book for years and years, let's download their brain a little bit and have them start to put those lessons on in a project. And now me, you know, a fresh architect out of school, I can start to learn what the grizzled vet's been learning. And the last thing I'm going to show you is our code calculator. Now, the right way to think about this is, or a way to think about it, is like TurboTax for the building code. With TurboTax, I'm going to say, well, this is how many kids I have. I'm married. I live in California. I make this much money. And then based on the information I put in, TurboTax is going to tell me I owe all my money in taxes. So same thing here. I'm going to enter in information about my building. Occupancy type. What's the function of the space? How big's the designed area in each one of those spaces? Is it sprinklered or not? What's the type of construction? Do we have fire separated occupancies or not? And based on the information I put in and the requirements of the jurisdiction, the code calculator is going to tell me whether or not my building is compliant. So here I can see the building area. I'm getting a big red flag is not compliant. It's very not happy with me. And I can see, oh, it looks like this section on the third floor, this B occupancy group, 57,000 square feet. It's not happy with that. It exceeds the allowable area. But maybe I don't trust this UpCodes machine and I want to see it for myself. Well, we're going to walk you through and give full transparency about how we arrived at these conclusions. And we're going to do that on every section. So we're going to click in here to see calculation. And essentially what this is going to do is walk through the same logic of the code that you would. So does this building meet the exemptions for unlimited area? Well, you mean the ones according to section 507.1? All right, well, they're linked right there. Let's go check it out. Okay, probably doesn't apply. Well, is there any sort of area factor increase due to frontage? Based on the perimeter and based on the distance to right of way or lot lines, I can get my qualifying perimeter. I'm going to calculate my weighted average through this equation. And that's going to get me to my area factor increase due to frontage, which I'll plug into my equation. Now, again, each step along the way, we're referencing the section of code that was used to arrive at this conclusion. So how did we get that equation? Where does that come from? Oh yeah, and you all know this equation, I'm sure. So we're going to do this through building area, height in feet, building height in stories, egress and occupant loads, exits per space, exits per story, travel distance, dead end corridor length, stairway and corridor width. We'll start to go into some fire rating calculations. And actually, this is a brand new addition here. Interior building element fire resistance rating. And each step along the way, again, we're going to show you the calculations of how the code arrives at these conclusions. What are my different firewall ratings, fire area separations, corridors, etc. And everybody's favorite, it would be our plumbing calculator. So we're going to tell you how many plumbing fixtures are required in each different space based on the occupant load. Now, most architects, at least, became architects so they could count toilets in buildings, and they're sad to see that piece of their daily life go out the window with the code calculator, but they get over it for the most part. So all this information is going to be spit out onto an Excel sheet. And earlier we referenced, we said that all the codes are free, and the sections that are referenced in our calculations are all going to be linkable. They're all linked to the correct section of code. So again, if I share this spreadsheet, someone can go on to 503 in the exact jurisdiction in the right year, and it's going to take them to the perfect section. Now, a lot of folks will download this and include this on their plans. I'm going to go into the code calculator here briefly and just show that as you're going through and entering information in, this is a great way to figure out what the downstream implication of certain modifications that you might make to your building would be. So what if I want to make a particular space an accessory space? Well, can't do that. And there's lots of helpful guides in there. Well, tell me about accessory spaces. All right. What if we want to make it mezzanine? Oh, no, can't do that. We can even do a podium building. We can add a horizontal separation here. Maybe I want to change the whether or not it's fire separated or not. Again, here's a little helpful guide to walk me through it. What are the downstream implications if it's not fully fire separated? Or what if I'm going to change the type of construction? Are there other types available to me based on my current configuration? Have I really thought about doing mass timber? So some of the information we're going to key in, we're going to use drop downs. A lot of the information is going to be binary questions. Is it a place of worship? Is it an indoor sporting event? Is it a care facility, etc.? And at this point, that's about all of the key items I wanted to highlight. And I think we'll switch gears and go into some Q&A here.